Strip. Now, that's what they told her. 3 junior mechanics in a sweltering hangar, drunk on rank and youth, grinning like wolves. They thought they were being funny, telling the older woman in faded coveralls to undress for a routine inspection. She wasn't like the others on base. She was quiet, plain, gray hair pulled back. No name anyone recognized. Just another contractor. So they laughed as she reached for the zipper on her jumpsuit. One elbowed the other. A phone came out. Camera angled low. Someone whispered, "Bet she's ex-guard, washed up." But Sarah Langley didn't react. She didn't ask if it was protocol, didn't demand a superior, didn't flinch. She turned her back to them, and that's when everything went dead silent. Because the mark down her spine, visible through her thin, sweat-soaked t-shirt, wasn't a tattoo. It was a warning, a downward triangle, sharp as a combat knife. Beneath it, encrypted coordinates, and at the base of her spine, a hawk with wings spread wide. Not decorative, not nostalgic, classified. Then the hangar doors slammed open. Colonel Mark Fenley stepped in with 2 senior officers. He caught one glimpse of that symbol and stopped cold. The folder in his hand hit the floor with a flat, ringing slap. "Jesus," he whispered. Because he'd seen that mark before, in files stamped "Top Secret Burn" after reading. He knew exactly what it meant. Task Force Viper, a Black Ops unit that didn't exist. A mission buried so deep. Even the Pentagon pretended it never happened. And the survivors? They disappeared into the civilian world. New names, new lives. No recognition, no medals. Sarah Langley wasn't supposed to be here, but she was, standing in the middle of a military hangar, half undressed, humiliated, and holding more classified ink on her back than most men in that room had clearance to comprehend. Every joke died, every grin faded, and every man in that room understood. They hadn't just embarrassed a woman, they had awakened something far more dangerous. He just stared, eyes locked on the ink down Sarah's spine like he'd just seen. That triangle, it belonged to a team that vanished in Afghanistan over a decade ago. The coordinates. They pointed to a mission site no one in uniform dared mention aloud. And the hawk. That was the mark they gave the ones who were left behind, and somehow found their way home. Sarah slowly zipped her coveralls back up. No fluster, no shame. Her fingers moved with military precision, her expression unreadable. Then she picked up her clipboard, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just dropped a silent bomb in the middle of the hangar. Harper was still standing there, pale, silent, frozen. He'd thought she was just some aging tech with a clipboard, someone easy to intimidate, someone beneath him. But now, he was looking at a woman who had once survived being abandoned behind enemy lines, and returned with intel that stopped a war before it started, and she didn't even raise her voice. The colonel stepped forward, slow and deliberate. His voice, when it finally came, cut through the tension like a blade. "Stand down." "Corporal," everyone froze. Even the engines seemed to quiet under the weight of those words. Harper stammered something about protocol and security procedures, but Fenley didn't need explanations. His stare alone stripped the excuses from the air. "Stand down." No yelling, no bark, just the kind of authority that came from ordering men into missions they weren't expected to return from. Sarah said nothing. She didn't have to. She had already spoken the loudest without saying a word. Behind her, Chen fumbled with his phone, still recording. "Delete it," Fenley said without looking. "If that footage leaks, you'll be explaining to a federal tribunal why you recorded a black-class operator without authorization." Chen's hands shook as he erased the file. Harper didn't move. He knew his career had just detonated. Sarah turned slightly, eyes back on her checklist. "Ma'am," the colonel said quietly, with a tone that bordered on reverence. "You're clear to continue your work. Whatever you need, you'll have it." She nodded once, then walked past the men who had tried to humiliate her calm, composed, and carrying her battered old toolbox like it was nothing. But now they knew better, because that box didn't carry just tools. It carried the weight of every man who had underestimated her. Part 3. The Quiet Storm. Sarah Langley didn't ask for justice. She didn't need it. Because in her world, dignity wasn't something you demanded. It was something you carried. Even when others tried to strip it away, with her coveralls zipped back up and her clipboard in hand. She walked into Bay 7 like the whole hangar hadn't just witnessed a career-ending humiliation for someone else. Everyone watched her now. No more smirks, no more jokes, just silent eyes tracking her every move. She knelt beside the Black Hawk and ran her fingers along the tail rotor assembly. Her touch was light, practiced like a violinist tuning strings by feel. Then she spoke. Calm, measured, certain. Blade track is off, about 2 millimeters. Probably been that way for weeks. Across the bay, Master Sergeant John Williams, a veteran with 3 decades of helicopter maintenance behind him, looked up from his checklist. His eyes narrowed. He checked the logs. She was right. Pilots had reported subtle vibration during hover mode, just enough to notice, not enough to trigger an alert. His team had been trying to isolate it for weeks. She found it in less than 5 minutes. By feel, Williams walked over. How'd you spot that without firing up the system? Sarah didn't even look up. Weight imbalance. Feel the blade tip. Stress is uneven. You can hear it if you know what to listen for. She moved to the engine housing. Her gloved hands traced the hydraulic lines like someone reading Braille. Then she stopped, tapped a coupling bracket. Pump 2's running hot, she said. You'll lose pressure within 60 days if it's not replaced. Williams scanned the maintenance records. The pump had been flagged for monitoring, scheduled for replacement 6 months from now. The heat signature had barely crossed the margin line, but she had felt it. No sensor, no alert. Just instinct built from fieldwork in places no manuals could prepare you for. And suddenly, no one in that hangar doubted who she was anymore. Not a contractor, not a civilian, not even a mechanic. She was something else entirely. And while the rest of them had been chasing ghosts in diagnostics, the real ghost had been standing right in front of them. Part 4. When the hangar learned her name. By the time Sarah Langley finished her inspection on the 3rd aircraft, Hangar 7 wasn't just quiet. It was humbled. No more side glances, no more whispers. Just the sound of tools being set down with more care than before, and the heavy silence of people realizing they'd misjudged someone who could run circles around them with nothing but a wrench and instinct. She moved from aircraft to aircraft with quiet precision, tracing metal fatigue with her fingertips, detecting heat stress in hydraulic lines by touch alone. Her findings weren't guesses, they were exact. She pointed out a cracked bearing in a rotor hub, a worn-out safety wire that had gone unnoticed for months, a vibration anomaly that even diagnostics missed. She was saving lives, and she made it look effortless. Master Sergeant Williams, one of the most experienced techs on base, followed her now not to supervise, but to learn. He watched as she calibrated by sound, adjusted torque by feel, and logged each detail with the calm of someone who had fixed aircraft while bullets cracked overhead. No one spoke to her, but everyone watched. And outside the hangar walls, the whispers began. They started in the break room, then maintenance meetings, then across squad briefings. That woman in Bay 7, she's not just a contractor. The colonel dropped his folder when he saw her back. She's Task Force Viper. You know what that means. You don't mess with people who have ink. They weren't allowed to talk about. Senior NCOs started finding excuses to walk through Hangar 7. Some lingered, others just nodded at her in passing. Quiet acknowledgments from men who knew the weight of what she carried. She didn't brag. She didn't correct anyone. She just worked clipboarding each system, logging defects, recommending corrections that would prevent failures no one else saw coming. By the end of the day, Sarah Langley had become a name that carried weight, not because she demanded respect, but because she reminded everyone what it truly looked like. And the boys who laughed that morning, they weren't laughing anymore. They were taking notes. Part 5. The Reckoning. At exactly 1400 hours, Corporal Evan Harper stood outside Colonel Fenley's office. His dress uniform was flawless, creased sleeves, polished boots, tie centered like a textbook photo, but his hands, they wouldn't stop shaking. Next to him stood Technical Sergeant Mills, his direct supervisor, arms folded, jaw tight. Mills didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look on his face said it all. This wasn't going to end well. The colonel's aide opened the door. "You're up." They stepped inside. The office was cold and clean. No windows, just files, maps, and a nameplate that carried more weight now than Harper had ever understood. Colonel Mark Fenley didn't offer a seat. He stood behind his desk, arms behind his back, eyes fixed on Harper like he was a loose bolt in a combat rotor. Harper opened his mouth to explain, but Fenley raised a hand. "I'm not here for your excuses." Silence. "You humiliated a woman with a service history buried deeper than your entire personnel file. You mocked her, filmed her, challenged her credentials, then demanded she strip in front of a group of enlisted men." Harper swallowed hard. "Sir, I thought, that's the problem." Fenley cut in. "You thought, you assumed, and you let your ego do the talking." Behind him, Mills said quietly, "Sir, he'll be receiving supplemental training and..." Fenley turned. "This isn't just about training. This is about judgment. This is about respect." And today, Corporal Harper failed both. He walked slowly around the desk, close enough now that Harper could see the lines in his face etched deep by years of command, of war, of cleaning up mistakes that started with arrogance. "You're getting 6 weeks of extra duty, mandatory conduct retraining, and a permanent letter of reprimand in your service file." Harper's face paled. That letter would follow him for the rest of his career, every promotion board, every reassignment, every opportunity weighed down by the same reminder. You disrespected someone you never took the time to understand. But the worst punishment wasn't official. It was already happening. By dinner, every senior mechanic, crew chief, and officer on base had heard what happened. The gossip didn't tell the whole story, but the lesson was clear. You never know who you're talking to, and you never, ever mistake silence for weakness. Part 6. The Reflection. Later that night, Harper sat alone in the corner of the enlisted club, staring into a beer he hadn't touched. Around him, the room buzzed with quiet conversations, the occasional clatter of pool balls, the muffled thump of jukebox bass, but he didn't hear any of it. He was still back in Hangar 7, still seeing the ink on her back, still hearing the colonel's voice. "You humiliated someone who was never supposed to exist." Across the room, Master Sergeant Williams approached. "Mind if I sit?" Harper nodded weakly. Williams eased into the chair, resting his arms on the table, gaze level and calm. "You know what you did today?" "Son." Harper's throat tightened. "Everyone keeps asking me that, because we want to make sure you understand." Williams leaned in slightly. "That woman, she's the reason this base exists. People like her. They do the kind of work the rest of us pretend doesn't happen." Harper looked up. "How do you even know she's who they say she is?" Williams gave a tired smile. 30 years in this job. I know the look. I saw it in the way she handled those tools, the way she walked, the way she stood still when you tried to tear her down." He paused. "But mostly, I saw it in the colonel's face. I've seen Fenley mad. I've seen him furious. But I've never seen him scared." Harper dropped his gaze. From behind them, Senior Airman Rodriguez approached, leaning against the edge of the booth. "My grandfather was in Vietnam, intel work. He told me stories about ghosts operatives who did jobs that never made it into the files, who came back with scars and silence. He said you could always recognize them, not by the medals, but by the way they watched the room." Rodriguez nodded toward the hangar window in the distance. "She didn't just carry tools, she carried history. And you tried to reduce her to a punchline." Harper exhaled slowly. "How was I supposed to know?" Rodriguez's eyes narrowed not in anger, but something deeper, sadder. "You weren't. That's the point." He pushed off the booth and walked away. Harper didn't move, just sat there, heavy with the realization that the worst mistake he made that day wasn't about protocol. It was about judgment. Part 7. The Legacy. At dawn the next morning, Sarah Langley walked toward the base gate, toolbox in hand, desert sun just beginning to paint the horizon gold. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Behind her, Hangar 7 had already changed. She'd come in invisible, just another contractor, another older woman in grease-stained boots. But she left as something else entirely. Not with applause, not with ceremony, just with silence. The kind that followed people who had earned it. At the gate, the staff sergeant glanced at her ID, then at her collar, where a faint edge of the black triangle peeked out beneath the fabric. He didn't ask, he just nodded. "Have a good day." "Ma'am, you too, Sergeant." And then she was gone. But her story wasn't. 3 weeks later, When a new civilian contractor arrived for an avionics inspection, the air in Hangar 7 was different, sharper, more respectful. No smirks, no sarcastic questions. Just, do you need anything to get started? Would you like access to the digital logs? Let us know if we can assist. Because the lesson had stuck. It echoed in maintenance briefings, in coffee room conversations, in NCO training sessions. Not the scandalous version of what happened, but the truthful one. Treat everyone with respect until they prove they don't deserve it. Ask before assuming. You never know who's standing in front of you until it's too late to take back how you treated them. Master Sergeant Williams even added a new section to the base training module for incoming techs. He didn't mention her name. He didn't have to. They called it Protocol 7. A simple reminder burned into the routine. Excellence doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, does the work, and walks away. In Colonel Fenley's office, Sarah's inspection report stayed on his desk for months. Not because it was exceptional, though it was, but because it represented something rare. Quiet brilliance, unrecognized sacrifice, strength without ego, the kind of person the world forgets, until she shows up again and reminds everyone what it really means to wear the uniform even if no one remembers the missions you survived. Part 8. The final message. Sarah Langley never spoke another word about what happened in Hangar 7. She didn't need to. The silence she left behind was louder than any speech. Her legacy wasn't carved into plaques or medals. It was burned into memory. A lesson carried from one mechanic to another, whispered in briefings, passed down through training manuals in the form of quiet reminders. Respect isn't earned through noise, it's earned through presence. And Sarah had that in every step. After her report was filed and signed, she packed up her battered toolbox and walked out of the hangar without a glance back. No drama, no bitterness. Just the same calm focus she carried when she first walked in. At the gate, the senior sergeant who checked her out didn't ask any questions. But when he caught a glimpse of the triangle ink just barely visible beneath her collar, he straightened his posture, gave a slow nod, and said, "Come back safe, Mama Maitsemo." She returned it with a faint smile. "That's the plan, Sergeant." And then she disappeared down the road, like a ghost stepping back into the shadows. But her story didn't fade. Weeks later, young airmen in Bay 7 still spoke of her in hushed tones. New recruits were warned, not with fear, but with reverence. Don't underestimate the quiet ones. Because everyone remembered what happened when one woman, older, quiet, unseen, turned around and reminded an entire base who she really was. Final reflection. Sometimes the people you ignore are the ones who've lived through wars you can't even imagine. Sometimes the ones you try to silence are the ones who carry the weight of keeping others alive. Sarah Langley didn't ask to be seen, but she made damn sure no one ever forgot her again. Have you ever witnessed someone underestimated and then rise in a way no one saw coming? Tell us in the comments. We read every single story. If this story resonated with you, to hit like. Subscribe for more stories about the heroes hiding in plain sight, because real strength doesn't always wear rank. And the loudest message can sometimes come from the ones who never speak. This is for the quiet professionals, the invisible legends, the ghosts who still show up, do the job, and leave everything better than they found it.